welcome to my talk. Isometric games don't exist. Are you sure that they do? And yeah, this is like a quite interesting topic to talk about. First, shortly about me. I'm Thomas, I'm your speaker. I am specialized in pixel game art. I'm doing this for a really long time. Generally, the stuff I like on is mostly roguelike, tactical, and Metroidvania games. So far, I worked as artist and art director on 25 games, and I do consulting for indie games. So there have been over 200 projects I consulted. And for the last 6 years, I have been an art director. For the last 3 years, for Tiny Build, I'm currently working on a game which is named Streets of Rogue 2, and that will come out into early access on the 22nd of October. So quite stressful right now, but there are a lot of games which use pixel art I worked on, and maybe you might know some of these if you are playing pixel art games. And I ended up creating a free guide on the internet, which is named Isometric Games Don't Exist. And this is a free way to teach. It's 40 charts. You can download them. I will give you the link at the end of the talk. And most of the slides I have on the presentation also show those cards. And yeah, it's like for teaching. It's free to use for anybody. You can print them, eat them, do with them what you want. I don't really care. I hope you have fun with them. And so why would anybody end up talking about that topic? Because obviously everybody talks about isometric games. And so originally I didn't really plan to do this. I just wanted to answer a couple of really simple questions about perspective or projections in video games, and I am a learned engineer. So it turns out that in those teaching materials for engineers, computer graphics are only a niche topic, and shockingly, nothing like this existed. And also, it's not a topic where you really can make money from it, but actually you can annoy people. So that is what this talk is all about. So also I found out while researching that topic over the last 8 years, I mean, I did not continuously research it, like I was just looking into it, and like you look at other sources, and then you find out that like the scholars, they are like really butted their head against each other, and there is like a whole English school and the whole German school, and they say fundamentally different things, which end up with a state where it's not really clear which definition is like the correct one. Details really do matter, and I will go to those details. So first of all, like there are tons of different projections in games, and in the chart I color group them. In the chart I go in depth for everything. We are looking here purely at what isometry means, because a lot of those projections, everybody says they are isometric. So, but what is isometry? And this is really funny, because it's an axonometric and orthographic parallel graphical projection in which all angles between the axes are iso. So if you look at this and you don't know what I'm talking about, the only thing you need to know is that this is a very special case, and it's very clearly scientifically defined. So extremely clear, yeah, except for the end user, because you look at the thing and you think it's isometry. There is also like, I read so many video games articles from journalists, and everybody talks about isometric perspective. And this is the first thing which really should trigger anybody who knows their thing as an artist, because actually perspective is a type of a graphical projection, but it's not the other way around. So like you can have a perspective or you can have a parallel projection. And by definition also, isometry has no vanishing points because it's a parallel projection. So anything which has like an overhead camera and is 3D and it has like a vanishing point, stuff is getting smaller. By definition, scientific definition, this is a perspective with an overhead camera. It can't be isometric. We see this whole group of games consistently referred to as isometric games. So sorry to break it to you, those are not isometric games. There's a Pandora's box in scholarship, and people got really, really, really picky about it. And this is the main point which took me to overcome a really long time. So it's like, what is orthographic and what is oblique. And generally, those are like two words which describe a look of something. But it's really interesting because a lot of scholars, they then looked at the thing and they said, oh yeah, great. So this is orthographic, this is oblique. And because if you just look at it and you don't look at the mathematics, yeah, you're wrong. And 2/3 of the sources, they get also something like this wrong because the definition is mathematical. And if you just look at things, it is not. So an orthographic projection means one thing. It's in a real mathematical 3D space, and it has like a correct volume. And an oblique projection is like focused on length. So oblique you use mostly on paper, on plans as an engineer to measure out stuff. And yeah, it's a usage case. So there are games which have oblique projections. And anything which uses like a tile grid generally has an oblique projection because a tile is a square usually. Like tiles, old games are built from tiles. Like those are like tiny little puzzle pieces of graphics. And because like a tile usually has the length and the height of 1 and the diagonal of the square root of 2, this is by length. So those are all oblique. And oblique is not isometry, it's not the orthography. So every game generally which uses like a tile grid is not really an isometry because the mathematical definition for it would not work. And all of those oblique ones, they are artificial construction which are focused on getting the length right. So tile grid, length right. So that is like, yeah, oblique. And of course, like more modern games, like there's a little game by Larian Studios. Those are the guys who made Baldur's Gate 3. Their first game was actually Divine Divinity, and it was an oblique game. And what they did is they adjusted the obliqueness that it looks better. But just because something looks a little bit nicer, it does not mean like that the mathematical definition for isometry is the correct one. So it becomes looking nicer, but it does not become more isometric by the meaning. And you also can adjust any oblique projection you do just with the angles, that it also looks like more isometric, and then you just end up with different angles. But also this is like isometric. Nah, it's not, because what iso in the isometric means is that it's equal, so that all 3 angles are equal. And yeah, the other 3 angles are not equal. So what you need to do to first get to an isometry is you need to use a volumetric correct axonometry. So this means if you want to have an isometry, you need to have something which has a mathematically correct volume. And so you got a bunch of different options to create a correct volume, and those are those metries. So there's a dimetry, which is defined by 2 angles have the same axis. There's a trimetry, which 3 angles have the same value. And then there is the isometry, which means all of those 3 angles between the axes are the same. And so, like games like Fallout, which is in every list of the best isometric games, actually is a trimetry. And so here is my argumentation. So if you look just at tri and at iso, and you ask 100 people, which I actually ended up doing, like all people know shockingly what tri means, but only like 10 out of those 100 people guessed what iso means. So why don't we call those games trimetric games? Because isometric is even more special and it does not really make sense. So also being like really close, but not exactly there, is like by the definition not really an isometric game. So Baldur's Gate 2 is a dimetric game because it only has like 2 of the same axes. And here I would even argue that dimetric is a shorter word than isometry. So like the argumentation that, oh, isometry is the simpler word is not really like going, because dimetric is shorter and easier to understand. So why don't we use this? I don't know. And I mean, in basic school, you learn like 1 + 1 is 2. That's like generally how science is done. So we are looking at something like Diablo. Is Diablo an isometric game? Because 116.75, 116.75, and 126.86, it's not enough equal or ISO for me. Maybe it's for you, but I mean, I learned in basic school 1 + 1 is 2, so I really don't know. So there's the other thing that, like, if you have a diametric projection like this, I mean, those are like those Zelda-like top-down games. This is one I made, where there is more or less a correct volume that you can also, this is like the flat view, and some people call this isometric. I don't know why. This is a diametry. You can also rotate those, like you just take like the 2 planes, you rotate those. Now it's a rotated diametry. So this is still a diametry. This is not the isometry because the angles are not the same. Always referred to as isometry. So that's a rotated diametry. This is not the isometry. I think like every single article I read about Into the Breach was naming it the isometric game. So I don't know why this is, but now you know why this is not the case. And yeah, it's also volumetric correct. It's an orthography. It's just not the isometry. So we like kind of get to the point where we see that isometric is something really special and really, really unique. So are there any isometric games? Oh, I forgot one thing. I didn't like not give you like the overall overview. So sorry, I can't like give you one now. But isometry is a very specific subform of an axonometric projection. So there are 3 parallel axes. Iso is the Greek word for equal. There are exactly 120 degrees between each axis of that. It's a very special case. And yeah, I just told you, there are actually 2 games I found which are isometric. And the oldest one I know is from 2014. So literally, I know 2 isometric games. And that is on the one hand, Monument Valley, really famous mobile game from 2014, runs on a 3D engine, has exact 120-degree axis. And the second one came out not too far ago. It's Tunic. It's from 2023. And also this is a perfect isometry. So I know 2 isometric games. Thanks. Now you also know 2 isometric games. If you find any other game, because I looked through the whole list of Wikipedia, isometric games, anything, I checked like over 2,000 games. I have 2. So if you find another one, please send it to me that I can add it here. So thanks for listening. You can get the guide here on itch.io, on Xiangmu itch.io. You can make a photo. And also on Saturday, Alexandra, who has a talk later here, and we are making a class which is named Pixel Art for Beginners. It's just free Saturday drawing school, and we have like a little community. You can send your artwork you're creating during the stream, and if you want to create art and want to get better, you can join us there. Also now it's time for questions, so please go ahead, tear me apart. Actually, it's not isometry. Thanks.
That's the thing. Just the government. Don't be scared yet. So that's for you. You're not leaving without a gift.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man. I can bring it in, man. So, any questions? We are really within schedule. I'm flying.
Always wanted to ask a question during an alarm. Thanks very much. Super funny talk. Very oddly specific. Just one solution. So I also come from an engineering background before the millennium, I guess. And the way we solved these things, although we did never look into this, everything was always called pseudo-isometric. You know, pseudo-isometric is a solution for everything. It can be tree, B, whatever. If you call Diablo pseudo-isometric, that's the solution.
Yeah, it's a solution. It's like putting a patch on a really ugly scar. So yeah. That's generally, it's like really hilarious, and because it's so hilarious, I wanted to make this talk hilarious because it's a really dry topic.
More questions?
Yeah, behind you.
Oh.
It would be really nice if we could shorten the pseudo-isometric to just isometric, because who knows the difference, really?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's what people generally do. Like, I mean, if everybody would pay me a cent if, like, they read isometry and it's used wrong, I would be multi-billionaire, so...
A suggestion for your next talk. Do you know how often people call 3D scenes with a fixed camera 2D scenes? You know, do you remember the new 2D game? I don't know. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. It's a 2D game. It's on a 2D screen, so everything on a 2D screen is 2D. So I don't see a third dimension there. I don't know what's wrong with that.
Any more questions? We're still within schedule. Yes, no, maybe? I think we're good. Okay, awesome. Give it up one more time for Thomas.
Thank you all. Have great game dev days.